Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering what is probably the most under-discussed and underappreciated character archetype in Baldur's Gate 3, the classic dexterity-based monk. You'll almost never see a guide to this character on the internet, because it's so overshadowed in build guides by its big brother, the Tavern Brawler monk. In Baldur's Gate 3, the feat Tavern Brawler is basically custom made for monks. It increases your attack, your hit chance, and your damage with unarmed strikes. So monks obviously gain a lot of value out of that, and it's based on your strength. It's so powerful, in fact, that it increases your hit chance to well over what the game is designed to support, and your damage to higher values than the game is balanced to allow. And so that feat by itself means that almost every monk build on the internet you're going to see is based off of strength. However, that's not a requirement for monks at all, and in fact the monk character gets to use dexterity, the best attribute in the game, for its unarmed strikes and its weapon attacks, and so you can make a monk build based off of dexterity that doesn't have to twist itself to take strength that it has no use for other than Tavern Brawler, simply by not using the feat Tavern Brawler. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say that this character is going to be as powerful as a Tavern Brawler monk, because it won't. Tavern Brawler is broken. It breaks the game wide open and is one of the most powerful things that you can be doing. But the dexterity-based monk is still an extremely powerful character, and does have some real mechanical advantages over the Tavern Brawler monk. You get to be much more flexible, much more single attribute dependent, and much less item dependent than the Tavern Brawler monk, meaning that your playstyle and play through the way that you approach the game are much less constrained when you're playing a dexterity-based monk than they are when you're playing a Tavern Brawler monk. Now, you're going to be doing a little bit less damage, but you do get some more strategic options, which I'll talk about as we build the character, and you get the warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing that you're playing a character that's in line with the game balance, and not one that is totally broken. Of course, if you do just want to play a Tavern Brawler monk, I have many guides. I think every other guide to monk that I have done uses Tavern Brawler, and so definitely go check those out for some of the most powerful characters available in the game. But if you're looking for a really fun playthrough and a character that gives you a lot of strategic flexibility and challenge, then I definitely recommend a dexterity-based monk, because it is powerful, flexible, and can be built in a lot of different ways, and is a character that I think deserves a lot more coverage than it gets in the Baldur's Gate community. So that's what we're going to be building today. Let's get to it. I'm using Astarion as the example character here because he makes the best monk in the game, thanks to his unique story abilities, giving him a ton of additional damage, especially in the late game. This means that for every attack he's doing, he's going to power it up significantly, and thanks to the sheer number of attacks this character is making, not only is this one of the best ways to use his abilities, he's one of the characters that most optimizes this class combination, and so it is incredibly powerful to play a monk with Astarion. If you're building this as a custom character, though, then I would recommend Dwergar or Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf as your racial options, because Dwergar's out-of-combat invisibility and enlarge synergize extremely well with Monk, and the bonus movement speed from the Wood Elf variants gives you a ton of additional movement speed, stacking extremely well with the Monk's additional movement speed, and the bonus action movement that we're going to get from rogue levels down the line to make your character light speed. This becomes one of the fastest possible characters in the game, even without that bonus, and with it, it gets even faster, and that means you will always be able to position it any point on the battlefield that you want to, which of course is incredibly powerful. This is a melee striker character that wants to be up next to high priority targets, so the more movement speed and mobility we have, the better. For that reason, also Githyanki is pretty reasonable, because the once per day Misty Step can be very valuable as well. For our first level, though, we actually are not going to take Monk. Since this build is going to want Rogue levels later down the line, I think it's much better to start with Rogue as your first level, rather than grab Monk levels initially. This gives us two things that are really useful for this character. One, of course, is the incredible skill access that Rogue gives you. This lets this character be your lockpicking character and provide a ton of utility to your party by opening locks and having access to a bunch of useful skills, but also it gives you the weapon and armor proficiencies from Rogue. While in the late game we're going to be unarmored, there will be points, especially in the early game, where it will be better to be in light armor than to be in no armor before we get the items that the unarmored clothing that really powers up Monk's natural abilities, and so there will be various points where we'd rather just be wearing armor. And we also get access to hand, crossbow, and rapier proficiency, which massively increases the strategic flexibility of this character. This is one of the major advantages that Dex-based Monk has over Tavern Brawler-based Monk, because it gives you a significant boost to your ability to be strategically flexible. Since you have very high dexterity, you can use ranged attacks very easily, and since you are making weapon attacks rather than all unarmed attacks, we get to use some of the powerful weapons that are available in the late game to really enhance our character's options and apply the magical effects of weapons that are extremely valuable, especially when we're making a large number of attacks every turn. For our attribute selection, we are going to be taking an extremely greedy attribute split, which I've already set up here because I had to take this part of the video over again. And we are going to be going with Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom in a 17, 16, 15 split. This is the highest that you can get 3 attributes and to start with, and is, again, one of the advantages that Dex-based Monk has over Strength-based Monk is we get to use this very greedy attribute split. We'll be evening this out at level 4, giving us the highest possible attributes that we can get at that point in the game, and making our character have really excellent AC, initiative, and damage right from the beginning, but indeed all the way through the game. This character gets to be it gets to base all of its strength on the best attribute in the game, because dexterity is just such a powerful feature. For our skill selection, of course, I think that you, as with all rogue characters, you are going to want to have expertise in sleight of hand, and probably expertise in stealth, although perception expertise on Astarion is also pretty useful if you don't believe that you're going to be using this character for stealth. For our remaining 2 skills, it doesn't matter as much, although this character could take a less greedy attribute split and act as your party face by taking 12 charisma if you wanted to go for a 16, 16, 14, 12 attribute split. And then with expertise in persuasion, you could then take dialogue skills as well and be a pretty reasonable party face. So that's an alternate option that's available to you. However, for maximum damage, this is what we're going with, and that is our level 1 build. Let's move on to level 2. At level 2, we get to take our first Monk level. Monk obviously gives us a ton of things at level 1, but most importantly what it gives us is a lot of extra attacks. With Flurry of Blows on turns where you have key points available, you are going to be making 3 attacks, which is 3 times as many as most other characters at this level, but even on normal turns, where you're just making the additional martial arts bonus unarmed strike, you're making double the attacks of every other character at this level. That, combined with your rogue levels, means you have excellent skills and excellent damage at this point in the game, significantly more than you would just with a second level of rogue at this point, and so this gives us quite a bit of additional power for our party, even at this very early stage of the game. Obviously, the rogue levels will still be very good later on, but it's worth noting how much additional damage this character is doing compared to other characters at this very early stage, and it can really carry you through the early game because of the very strong attribute spread, giving you really excellent stats, and the very high damage of the character. You also get unarmored defense, but at this stage in the game, armor is probably still going to be better. You don't yet have anything that cares about not being armored, so you don't, other than unarmored defense, obviously. You don't yet have any fast movement features or anything like that, and so staying in light armor is probably going to be better since we currently only have 15 wisdom. You'll obviously just want to make the comparison based on what sets of clothing you have and what sets of armor you have, although those will be quite limited at level 2. At level 3, there's no significant decisions to make, but we are going to level up in Monk, and this gives us Step of the Wind, Dash, Disengage, and Patient Defense, all of which are pretty useful abilities. While these abilities will later be overtaken by the equivalent rogue abilities, which don't cost key points, for the early and mid-game, the Step of the Wind abilities are going to be incredibly powerful for you as well, and even in the late game, Jump not requiring a bonus action is still very powerful, so keeping Step of the Wind Dash in mind, even once you get Rogue's bonus action Dash, is going to allow you to traverse the battlefield with significantly more ease. At this stage of the game, though, you're usually going to be using your key points for Flurry of Blows, but sometimes you really do just need to get to that enemy, and Step of the Wind lets you do that. Patient Defense can be very useful as well if you find yourself in a scenario where you're going to tank a number of attacks and cannot kill all the enemies that are going to be attacking you. Spending a turn on bonus action on Patient Defense will allow you to tank for your party pretty well, and thanks to the very high armor class that you're going to have relative to most other characters at this stage in the game, you'll probably have somewhere around 16 AC, which is better than a lot of martial characters will be able to have at level 3, thanks to the available armors. You will be able to actually be quite defensive with Patient Defense, causing enemy attacks to miss you very reliably. Not something that I would recommend spending your turns on all the time, of course, but it does give you quite a bit of additional flexibility when you need to use those abilities. At Monk level 3, we get to take our subclass, and it's no surprise that we're going to go with the strongest of the 3 subclasses, the Way of the Open Hand. This allows us to use Flurry of Blows to topple, stagger, and push enemies, all of which are very powerful abilities. Toppling enemies can be used to essentially lock them down, and you can find a lot of situations where reducing enemy movement speed by half or forcing them to spend their turn getting up in a bad situation is effectively the same as a stun, especially when combined with your bonus monk movement speed and your additional dashes and so on. Knocking an enemy down further away from your allies can prevent them from attacking can fully prevent them from attacking, which is just as good as Stunning Strike will be at later levels. And finding ways to use this ability to prevent enemies from acting is one of the most satisfying and fun ways to interact with the game with Monk, and of course incredibly powerful. Stagger and Push are also extremely useful. You can use this to deal extra damage by pushing enemies off cliffs, or one-shot enemies by pushing them into the abyss, as well as Stagger just being a very powerful crowd control effect. At level 4, we get access to Slow Fall, which doesn't do that much, but is fun when it does come up. Gaining resistance to falling damage for your reaction can be useful in some circumstances if you need to jump down onto enemies in order to hit them from the right. Hit the correct enemy, and they're much lower than you. And since you won't have a ton of use for your reactions at this point, Slow Fall actually does sometimes save you a little bit of damage. Not a powerful ability, but one to keep in mind. And then for your feat, you are going to take an ability improvement and even out your stats, getting us to the highest possible stat spread at this level with 18, 16, and 16, meaning that our armor class is now going to be up to 17, excuse me. Our armor class is going to be up to 17 just from our stats. I don't know why I said the wrong number twice. I definitely know the number. As well as having our high constitution, which mitigates some of the issues that monks sometimes have with just having relatively low AC for being a martial class and relatively low hit points. The fact that we're able to maintain 16 constitution while still maxing out our combat stats as well as our wisdom means that we're going to have pretty decent AC. A lot of characters will not be able to reach higher than 17 at level 5 thanks to the available item sets, and so this character actually gets to stay competitive on armor class. We'll fall behind a little bit in the late game once the really powerful armor sets come out, but at this point, we are just as well armored as any fighter will be. At Monk level 5, we get extra attack, allowing us to make 4 attacks per round with whatever weapon we've found, plus our unarmed attacks, which is obviously extremely powerful, and we get the most powerful feature of Monks, Stunning Strike. Stunning Strike is just an incredibly broken ability. It uses the higher of your strength or dexterity for the save DC, so it works just fine off of dexterity, and is going to stop enemies from moving. It only takes an attack, stop enemies from acting or doing anything. It only takes an attack action, so at this stage of the game, we could theoretically stun twice and then Flurry of Blows as well. And if you fail the Stunning Strike, you can just try again, which is one of the great things about it. Enemies who pass the save you will often just have to make the save again. So you're very reliably able to lock down whatever enemy you need stunned, and so the strongest enemy in every fight just won't be able to fight you starting at this level, which is, of course, an incredibly powerful effect. No real decisions to make, though. We're just continuing to gain in power level, so let's level up to level 7. At level 7, we have our first real decision that we have to make at this point of the game, because at this point of the build, because we need to decide whether we care more about the additional unarmed strike damage or more about getting earlier access to the additional thief bonus action by taking rogue levels. I think in general, Monk 6 is just so powerful, even though we will likely be using a weapon, so we won't be getting full value out of the manifestation damage, but Monk 6 is just so powerful because it gives you wholeness of body, so it's a once per day an additional bonus action already, so just a lot of extra damage from that, as well as the healing and key point restoration. The fast movement is extremely useful as well, powering up your fast movement massively, and the overcoming damage immunities is very helpful as well for a lot of the damage that we're doing, in addition to the extra damage. So while I think you could very reasonably argue that you would want to get the additional bonus action from Rogue sooner, I think it's just better to go to level 6 Monk, because level 6 Monk is just such a powerful collection of abilities for Open Hand Monk that it's very much worth getting earlier. That said, there's no build decisions that we have to make there once we've decided we're going Monk, so let's go to level 7, or level 8. And at Monk level 8, we are going back for our Rogue levels. This gives us bonus action dashes, hides, and disengages without spending key points, which is very, very useful and plays extremely well into Monk's strategy of being a hit-and-run character, where you're going to be jumping in, stunning, or assassinating the highest damage or most dangerous enemy on any given turn, and then running away to safety. With the bonus action dashes, you can do that even more easily. It does cost you, of course, a flurry of blows or a bonus action attack every time you use them, but mobility is so powerful that it's often worth giving up some damage, and this character is less focused on pure burst damage than the strength-based monks, so what you're going to be doing for this character is using it to lock down enemies much more than you are going to be just blowing them up. So the ability to reposition here is much more relevant than for the Tavern Brawler Monk. The Rogue levels therefore synergize extremely well with Monk already, but that's not really what we're here for. It's just a really nice bonus. What we are here for is to get Thief Rogue at level 3, which just gives us an additional bonus action. That's an extra dash, so we can now move up to 3 times our movement speed in a turn if we want, plus our jump distance, or an extra flurry of blows, so we can now attack up to 6 times in a turn, which is an insane number of attacks, and is going to be doing a massive amount of damage, and we can do that basically every turn as long as we have key points. Even if we don't have key points, we still get many attacks per turn, in addition to the hides, dashes, and disengages. The bonus action from Fast Hands also gives us another option, which I will talk about when we get to our feat, but because we have the additional bonus action, we can now make additional offhand attacks if we have a second weapon equipped, and one of the great things that we can do with that is use 2 hand crossbows to be a very competent archer. We can lean even more into that playstyle depending on what feat we select, and at this next level, we are just going to go ahead and take level 4 Rogue to get access to that feat as soon as possible. This is a point where the build could diverge pretty significantly. If you take 4 Rogue, then you aren't hitting level 9 Monk, so you won't be able to get the AoE damage from Open Hands Monk level 9. I think that it's better to get the 3rd feat on these builds because it lets you be much more flexible with how you're going to build your character, but the additional AoE damage from Monk level 9 is also very powerful, so I do want to mention that you could absolutely just continue to go to level Monk all the way to the end in order to get that. As is, though, I think it is better to get the 4th level of Rogue because the feat options that you can get at this point are just so powerful. We have a lot of great options that we could take, and I like and I want to highlight a number of them, so let's take our 4th level of Rogue and talk about what feats we can take. Obviously, we could always just take an ability improvement and go to 20 dexterity. Dexterity is just really, really good, so that's always an excellent option. Alert is extremely powerful on honor mode. It's less necessary for dexterity-based characters, but still excellent, meaning that you'll always go first, so that's always an option as well. Then, because we're a dexterity monk, there's a couple feats that we can get access to that the strength-based monks can't really use that actually give us a lot of additional strategic options. One of these is Sharpshooter. I talked a little bit about this already, but one very viable playstyle for this character, because we started with a level of rogue, is to switch between is to play a hybrid character, switching between ranged and melee as appropriate, with 2 hand crossbows. We have the additional offhand attack from Thief Rogue, and with the Sharpshooter feat, that would allow us to be as competent a hand crossbow archer as just about any other character. It gives us our additional sneak attack damage, which we are also getting to utilize with our melee attacks, thanks to the fact that we can equip a weapon. And we therefore would be able to be a threat at ranged and in melee with Sharpshooter. Another option that gives us a lot of strategic flexibility is Sentinel, because Sentinel only uses weapon attacks, but this character gets to equip a weapon. Sentinel is really good for for monks, because monks are a character that wants to be next to high-value enemies, locking them down and preventing them from getting away. Often you'll be able to kill them in a single round or stun them, but sometimes you don't want to spend the key point resources on bursting enemies down, and it's good enough to be next to mages with Sentinel a lot of the time, just preventing them from escaping. Or next to characters that need to get to your allies with Sentinel a lot of the time, preventing them from escaping. That way you can force enemies to engage your monk, which is obviously not what they want to do if you have Sentinel, and so if you're on a squishy enemy that you would rather have focusing on your monk than on another character, or trying to run away from your monk, Sentinel can be very powerful with the weapon attacks available to this character, and so that's another strategic option that this character gets. I think of these, the one that I am going to say is probably the strongest is to take Sharpshooter, because it gives you just a whole other layer to your character, but all of those are excellent options and ones that I wanted to highlight, depending on what you think your party needs. At this next level, we're going to level up in Monk again, which gets us Evasion, which is very powerful, and Stillness of Mind, which does mean that you are going to want to look for Charmed or Frightened immunity, because Stillness of Mind requires an action and is going to eat your turn if you get Charmed or Frightened. It's nice to break out of those abilities, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing anything on your turn anyways, but immunities are still just better because they are going to prevent this ability from eating your action. I do wish the interface was a little better for this, because it just automatically casts and prevents you from using your turn, but with Charmed, at this point in the game, it should be fairly easy to have immunities to Charmed or Frightened. Evasion, of course, is very good, especially because we are going to have very high dexterity for a monk character, since we're based on dexterity, meaning that we're going to take very little damage from offensive spells. Finally, at monk level 8, we get to maximize our key points, and we get an additional feat, which lets us max out our dexterity. You could also, if you wanted to, stay at 18 dexterity and take one of the other feats that I mentioned, but one of the great things about this character is it gets to hit 20 dex and still get a feat, as well as having 16 con and 16 wisdom, so I definitely recommend maxing out your dexterity for the highest possible damage, hit chance, initiative, and armor class, all of which are the excellent features that dexterity gives you. This character is quite simple to build. As you can see, this is going to be one of my shorter build guides overall, but I think it's just incredibly powerful for all of that, and the simplicity is honestly a feature. You don't need to do anything in particular to make this character work. It just works really well out of the box, and is going to lock down your enemies, do excellent damage in melee and at ranged, thanks to Sharpshooter, or have a bunch of strategic flexibility with Sentinel, especially combined with certain items that we can use later on. And I think this character is very underappreciated in Baldur's Gate 3, but still provides a lot for a party, while being an extremely fun playstyle with the hit and run and martial arts features of Monk on full display. Alright, let's talk about items and combat strategy. For combat strategy for this character, there's really one stat that is more important to keep in mind than any other, and that is our movement speed. Notice that we have 45 feet of movement speed, really 46 feet of movement speed for some reason. I'm not 100% sure why it does that. But that will allow us to reach enemies from outside of their effective range very easily. You can stay 45 feet away from an enemy and they will be able to move only 30 feet towards you. And so you will always be able to get the first attack against melee enemies. You can move in to attack an enemy and then move out of their melee range again if you want to spend an action on cunning action disengage, and so you'll always be able to play a hit and run style even if you don't have the key points to consistently stun or trip enemies on your turn. The other thing that's really great about this is that if you use cunning action dash, it will double that movement speed, and you will have 90 feet of movement speed. 90 feet of movement speed is enough to stay out of the range of most ranged attacks in the game and still enter melee range on the following turn. So keep an eye on where your enemies are able to position, and you will always be able to stay away from their attacks and still strike on your following turn. That's the great thing about monks, and it's what sets them apart from other classes, is the incredible movement speed, increased even further with abilities like Long Strider or items that give you additional movement speed. And there are very few enemies in the game that can catch you if you want to get away. Not only does this let you just safely escape honor mode runs, it lets you kite enemies despite being a melee character, and also if you're using hand crossbows, you effectively add 30 feet of range and don't have to spend bonus actions on disengaging. It's also worth noting that sometimes it's worth it just to tank the attack of opportunity. You'll have okay AC and reasonable hit points, and you won't get hit a lot, so sometimes it's better just to dash or just to move away from enemies if that's something that you need to do. Of course, you also just have incredible damage, so you should be able to just kill most enemies before that comes up, but pulling bosses around the arena while the rest of your party sits back and blasts them from out of their effective range is very satisfying, and it's something that monks are excellent at, and darting in and out of combat and playing a hit and run playstyle lets you consistently target the correct enemies while making sure that your monk is incredibly safe. Remember also that you can bonus action hide anytime that you are in obscurement, so keep an eye on where shadows are and play with the stealth mechanics of the game as well. For your actual attacks against enemies, you're either going to be using opening with Stunning Strike or opening with Topple, depending on what you are attempting to whether you're attempting to stun or whether you're attempting to topple an enemy, and then you're going to Flurry of Blows them into oblivion, just like every other monk build will do significant amount of damage. Depending on what weapon you have equipped, you can get a lot of additional damage stats from that weapon, and one of the other great things about this character is it's almost completely item independent, so you can use just about any weapon that you find in the game that you happen to think is cool, and it will work very effectively with this character. There's a bunch of great options, but the only item that you really want on this character, there's really only one that is particularly important for this character, and that's the Boots of Uninhibited Kushigo, which just let you add your wisdom to your unarmed strikes, which effectively increases the damage of your unarmed strikes by 3. You're going to be making a lot of unarmed strikes, so that's just a lot of extra damage. Other than that, there's almost no specific items that this character needs. Having a pair of hand crossbows equipped gives you a great ranged option, so I definitely recommend a pair of hand crossbows or just a bow, depending on which you have better damage in and whether you took sharpshooter or not. If you took sharpshooter, you should definitely take 2 hand crossbows because it's going to let you apply the additional damage more often with the bonus action attacks. That's 4 ranged attacks, so that's plus 40 damage from sharpshooter, and that's great. Items that increase your damage on both your unarmed strikes and your melee attacks, like the Flawed Helldusk Gloves, are really good for this character because you will probably be doing a combination of the two to make use of the powerful weapon effects that you can get. The Bracers of Defense can increase your armor class to a pretty respectable value. This is without any buffs or anything, and we just have 20 AC and no bonus AC from our clothing or anything, so you can pretty easily reach 22 or 23 AC, which is very respectable for a character and excellent for a monk. And then you get to use just whatever the most powerful one-handed weapon or the most powerful non-two-handed weapon that you find is, and that will let you apply some really great magical effects. One that I think is particularly fun on this character is the Duelist's Prerogative, because the additional reaction, especially if you took the Sentinel, option, if you took Sentinel as your feat, this can let you lock down multiple enemies in a turn and make a whole bunch of additional reaction attacks, and so the Duelist's Prerogative is fun, and since you won't be using a shield or have an offhand weapon, you'll always be able to trigger the bonus effects of Duelist's Prerogative, so this is a great character to use it, and we have proficiency since we're a rogue. Other than that, you're really just looking for the standard things: increased initiative, anything that increases your armor class without being armor, and anything that increases the damage of your weapon attacks or unarmed attacks are all very powerful options for you as well. But this character is so item independent that you'll be able to use whatever the rest of your party doesn't need. It won't conflict with the rest of your party in any way, which is one of the great things about it. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Dex-based monk, and I think this character is really fun, really satisfying to play, and take on monk that you don't really see in Baldur's Gate 3 build guides, so I wanted to bring it to you. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a comment and like the video, and both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game content. And if you've really enjoyed the video and want to help support me and my channel further, you can feel free to do so with the buttons below the video, the joining as a channel member, or leaving a super thanks. And of course, I really do appreciate people who take the time and are generous enough to support me in that way. All right, my friends, cheers. I'll catch you next time.